Thus far, biologists have determined that there are around 35 to 40 animal phyla in existence, and this is all based on the fossil record, morphological characteristics, and now molecular techniques. The technical name for the animal kingdom is metazoa, with the first way to divide animals being those with or without differentiated tissues. Clades, porifera, and placozoa have no true differentiated tissues. All other animals can be clumped as eumetazoa, or true animals. Regardless, all animals are thought to derive from a choanoflagellate protozoan due to the posterior single flagellum amongst both groups. The best piece of evidence is to compare a choanoflagellate protozoan with the choanocyte, a specialized feeding cell in sponges, which we'll see in the next chapter. From there, the animal kingdom is further divided over the following clades. Clade radiata, which have radial symmetry, clade bilateria, which have bilateral symmetry, and amongst the clade of bilateria, there's clade acoelomate, which lacks a coelom, clade coelomates, which have a coelom, and then amongst the coelomates, there's clade deuterostomia, which includes chordates, that's mostly vertebrates, and echinoderms, which includes your sea stars and sea urchins and sea cucumbers. And then you have clade protostomia, which is everything else, insects, millipedes, centipedes, earthworms, mollusks, etc. But amongst the protostomia, they can be further divided into two clades, clade ecdysozoa, which includes your insects, and your arthropods, which molt the outer integument as they grow, and then you have the clade lophotrochozoa that do not molt the outer layer of integument as they grow, and that would include things like earthworms and mollusks. Regardless, molecular techniques have also allowed many groups to be reclassified as needed, and likely so in the future, and this could develop into new animal phyla. Based on fossil evidence, it is likely that animals first came around about 635 million years ago during a large time frame called the Precambrian. This time frame encompasses around 3.5 billion years of Earth's history and is such a mystery concerning life due to having fewer fossils to rely on for understanding of life. From 635 to 543 million years ago, a period of time called the Ediacaran period, which is named after Ediacaran Hills of southern Australia, where a large group of animal fossils dating at this time were found. These animals were likely direct descendants of those opisthecont protists, and even share similarities in appearance with them, being anywhere from a few millimeters to a meter long. It's quite possible that more complex animals lived during this time or even before the Ediacaran period, but there's a bias in the fossil record towards organisms that produce hard body parts, making them much easier to find than those that produce much softer body parts. At the end of the Precambrian, the Paleozoic era began with the Cambrian Explosion. This period lasted from 542 to 488 million years ago. Here we finally start seeing animal body plans that still exist today. In fact, almost all animal phyla evolved during the Cambrian period, which is why it gets that title, the Cambrian Explosion of Biodiversity. Of course, at this time, animal life was limited to oceans, and arthropods up to 10 feet long were likely the dominant predators at the time. One of the most dominant species at this time was the Trilobite, which existed during the entirety of the Paleozoic era and resemble modern-day horseshoe crabs and pillbugs. They were also the first animals to have a sense of vision. The cause of this explosion in biodiversity is still debated among scientists, but here are a few major hypotheses so far. First, oxygen levels increased in oceans and the atmosphere, which are necessary for complex multicellular life to make more ATP in order to support complex tissues and organs. Increased continental shelves gave rise to more shallow oceans, giving more habitats and niches with evolutionary pressures to fill them. Also likely increased predator-prey relationships, which led to an arms race to get food and prevent from being eaten. All of these may be reasons for this explosion of animal life, but some scientists argue that there may have been more soft-bodied animals in existence prior to this. Unfortunately, we may never know. We do know that throughout Earth's history, there have been explosions and extinctions of biodiversity. After the Cambrian period, during a period called the Ordovician, land plant life emerged, and this allowed animal life to follow as new food sources became available. In arthropods, an exoskeleton and jointed appendages, in arthropods, which includes organisms like insects and crustaceans, an exoskeleton and jointed appendages allowed them to withstand gravity and drying out. Vertebrates, a skeleton with appendages and scales, feathers, skin, and hair, allowed these organisms to thrive on land. Unfortunately, the Earth was constantly changing with increased periods of volcanism shifts in continental plates and periods of temperature increases and decreases, and with that came mass extinctions, in which 60% of species go extinct within a 10 million year time frame. Now, since the Cambrian, there have been 5 mass extinctions. I will go over the 2 most well studied. Both mark the beginning and the end of the Mesozoic era, also known as the Age of the Dinosaurs. The first mass extinction is the Permo-Triassic extinction, which takes place at the end of the Permian and the beginning of the Triassic period. The reason why this wiped out almost 50% of all life on Earth, in fact, some numbers say 90% of marine life, are the following. In what is now Siberia, was once a very large volcanic activity going on, and this volcanic activity increased the temperatures worldwide. As you add more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, eventually it gets into the oceans, creating the oceans to be more acidic, causing algae to die off, meaning there's less oxygen available. And less oxygen means the oceans become hypoxic. Also, sea levels drop worldwide, causing a loss in habitat for many different organisms. Also possible, too, with the formation of the supercontinent Pangaea, that there became less habitat diversity. And as you can see, in large continents, usually in the middle, there is lots of deserts and less water availability. So these are all likely some reasons as to what created the biggest mass extinction on the planet. Now, the one that we're most familiar with is the end Cretaceous, which is also where the dinosaurs died. The biggest piece of evidence we have now for the death of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago is the impact hypothesis, which proposes that an asteroid struck into the Yucatan Peninsula of Mexico. Here you see a picture of rock strata, and right here is a little layer of a little element called iridium. Iridium is only found in asteroids, outer space, or in the Earth's core. Nowhere else. And as these iridium layer, as you get closer to the Yucatan Peninsula, many parts of the world, the layers of iridium start to increase. This is indicative of ash from the asteroid being spread worldwide. So now that we've introduced you to animals, we're going to look specifically at animals that do not have a backbone, also known as the invertebrates.